And good evening, everyone. This is yours truly, Michael Got Energy Stewart, coming to you live tonight with yet another segment on the 1994 crime bill. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing information that relates to specific crime stats beginning in 1985 up to 1995. So I want you to be able to see some stats as it relates to the crime bill and what impact it had on communities. Before I get into all of that, however, I want to first start off by thanking you all for taking the time to view this video if you're watching it as a pre-recorded video session. I want to thank you for taking time to watch it and listen to it. And certainly you are welcome to leave your comments. I ask that you just, try to be respectful with your comments. Now, I am by no means an expert on the 1994 crime bill, as I am availing myself to reading it. I don't have it on my table right now, but I actually downloaded the entire bill and copied it, and now I have it in a binder, and so that allows me to be able to reference it in my leisure. And so, if you haven't already read the crime bill, now it's pretty extensive. It's 350 plus pages, and there's a lot of terminology in there that you may not be comfortable with. And so, there's no rush. I'm taking my time as I go through it. In the previous video, I actually did a brief overview and summary of certain parts of section one or title one. And so I will be resuming those as well as I finish up a section. I'm going to be sharing my findings. And that's all I'm doing. I'm not in any way telling anyone or suggesting to anyone that they believe other than what they do believe. I'm just sharing information and sharing my perspective as I read through that bill. But the matter came up uh, to my attention as I was actually watching a few other video recordings from other persons on different social media channels as it relates to the crime bill. And I just kept hearing people throwing out there a 100,000 blacks that were specifically impacted by the 1994 crime bill. And I'm not saying whether or not that's true or false. That's not what this is all about. But um, I was kind of hoping that they would at least share where they're getting their numbers from. And so when it comes down to citing stats and numbers um, to kind of quell any speculation of any validity or truth, it's good to, at least be able to point people to where you're getting your numbers from and not just leave them trying to figure out, did you actually get these numbers from a reliable source or did you make these numbers up yourself? And so what I'm going to do tonight in this video is I'm going to be sharing with you some stats from the FBI on drugs in America, going back to 1980 and moving forward to 1995. And so these are not my stats. I did not create these stats. However, I am trained to analyze stats. That's something that I do on a daily basis. I do gather crime stats from my locale and from a variety of other areas, as I am a crime prevention specialist. So stats are important to me and helping me to develop specific and targeted crime prevention trainings and workshops. And so I'm going to share with you my findings as I look at these stats and these different charts and try to help you, if you don't know how to read them, try to give you some idea of what the stats are telling us. Now, Again, as with any set of stats that you may view, they are to a great deal highly subjective because not all regions and counties and cities participate in the sharing of information. So the numbers are not concrete. There is some margin of error, and then there is also some reality of omissions. And mostly because, like I said, not all areas participate in the sharing of their crime stats. But of those cities and counties and states that do participate in the sharing of their crime stats, where these numbers are aggregated and compiled. Um, we work off those numbers to get an idea of how something is impacting a certain area, a particular demographics, a particular group of people, and what have you. So tonight, that's what I want to do. I want to share that with you. So let me see if I can share my screen with you all so that we can start taking a look at some of these things. So I want to start off with what you see up here now is some estimated drug arrests in the United States from the period of 1980 to 1995. And then you should see estimated heroin and cocaine arrests, and again in the United States from 1980 to 95. And as we scroll down a little bit, we see the estimated marijuana arrests in the United States from 1980 to 1995, and then estimated synthetic drug arrests in the United States from 1980 to 1995, and then estimated other drug arrests in the United States from 1980 to 1995. So I'm beginning there for a very specific reason. Number one, it gives us a snapshot of those reported crime stats from various cities and counties at a time before the enactment of the 1994 crime bill, as many people know it. And it also gives us an idea of what impact uh, since in the enactment of the 1994 crime bill that it may have had on different demographic areas. But these charts aggregate those stats from all of the participating agencies throughout the United States. So the first set of stats and charts that we're looking at covers the entirety of the United States as it relates to those agencies throughout the United States that actually reported their stats to the FBI. And so in this first chart, let me see if I can enlarge that a little bit for you all. In this first chart, what we see here is the estimated drug arrests. Now, these numbers might be rather small for you, and you may not be able to quite make them all out. So, as I'm expanding this a little bit, I want to try and make it somewhat clear for you. In fact, let me do this. I'm going to just enlarge my screen a little bit and then blow it up a little bit more. And I'm hoping that as I do this, that you can see it a little better. Okay, I probably can enlarge that a little bit more. I'm learning to work with technology. Tell you, this is our new normal. So here on the far left, I'm hoping that you can see my pointer. Here on the far left is dealing with population size. Uh, let me see. Actually, this is dealing with number of criminal incidents or the drug arrest. So, And it starts off at 1980. So in 1980, you're looking at just under 600,000 drug arrests in 1980. And then from 1980, moving over to with this, we see this clear visual peak about 3/4 of the way moving to the right. We right at the 1989 mark, and we see a steady increase of drug arrests from about 600,000, just under 600,000 drug arrests to almost 1,400, 1.4 million. Let me get that correct. So we see from 1980 to 1989, there's a steady increase in drug arrests in the United States. And between that period of time, it peaks out at 1989 at just under 1.4 million drug arrests throughout the United States. Again, I'm going to repeat that this is based on those cities and counties and agencies that actually share their crime stat information. And then moving on from 1989, we see a decline in drug arrests. And at 1991, it dropped down to just over 1 million drug arrests throughout the United States. And if you notice, moving forward from 1991 to 1995, there's been a steady increase. Once again, there's been a steady increase of drug arrests in the United States, toppling out at 1995 at just over 1.4 million. So for someone like me who look at crime stats almost on a daily basis and analyze the information, the data that's there, what this simply speaks to me as a crime prevention specialist is that there was a noticeable need to address, if we go back to 1980 up to 1989, there was a noticeable need to address how policing was being done to curtail the steady incline of drug arrests in the United States. Now, this is all types of drugs. These are all types of drugs, not just your marijuana, not just your crack cocaine, not just your powder cocaine, not just your heroin, but this is all drugs, okay, that led to an arrest. And so this clearly speaks to a need that the communities that are reporting this information and sharing this data, that there's a need to make the community safe and as free of illegal drug activity as possible. Now, that's what it communicates to me. To a private citizen, it may not communicate the same thing. It may actually communicate something totally different to a private citizen. It all depends on, I guess, where you are at in terms of how this information relates to you. And so certainly I cannot speak to another's perspective or view on how they see it. And so I just want to share with you my perspective as a crime prevention specialist. This is what it communicates to me. It communicates to me clearly that during that time frame, there was in fact a need to address illegal drug activity throughout the United States. It was indeed a recognizable problem that needed to be addressed and could not continue on as it was in that time frame. And so what it also says to me from 1989 is that something was put in place, or some new efforts were employed that resulted in a reduction of numbers and drug arrests. In other words, what it's saying to me is that whatever the resolve was to address this growing drug problem, throughout the United States. Agencies came up with, and however they did it, they came up with something that was working. And for a couple of years, as we see from 1989 to 1991, there was a decrease in the number of drug arrests. Now, that could be any number and combination of efforts, and it's hard to pinpoint which was more result oriented than any other. But whatever it was that they put in place, it seemed to have been working, whether it was new laws that was enacted. Now, mind you, this is pre 1994 crime bill. This is all before the 1994 crime bill. So something was put in place, some efforts were employed that resulted in a decrease overall, a decrease in drug arrests. And it could be that certain types of drug activity was not going to result or end in an arrest, maybe a citation, um, referral to some type of a support program, whatever it was. And it appeared to have been working at least up until 1991. Now, as we look from 1991 moving forward, what do this tell me? It tells me that that was short-lived. Whatever those efforts were that seemed to have been working in reducing the number of drug arrests, it seemed to have been working. And then in 1991, it began to swing back to the other side, and then we started seeing a steady incline. Now, I would I would argue that between 1991 and 1993, seeing this steady increase of drug arrests, that this was a observation point and probably a trial and error point of either revisiting previous efforts and seeing whether or not they were still effective, or a toughening of drug laws to act more swiftly. It could be a number of things. And so, to be honest, we don't know without really digging deeper into other data that is out there that would kind of help paint the picture and tell the story more clearly. So, right now, at best, we can only speculate on the possibilities of what may have worked, what may not have worked, what may have been observed, what may not have been observed. We can only go with some speculations, having not availed ourselves to more research and more data. But looking at this chart, you know, um, and what it communicates to me, looking at this chart, is that there was again a need to address how the illegal drug activity was being met, how it was being handled, how it was being managed. And so, right around 1993, a decision had to be made, and I believe this is has been an ongoing discussion on Capitol Hill with our legislators and our law enforcement agencies on the fact that something needs to be done because we have a problem that is not going away. And it is the illegal drug activity. It's just not going away. And so what we see from 1993 to 1994, we see a steady incline in that year. Actually, from 91, there was a steady incline. Now, it was a slight incline between 1991 up to 1993. And then that increase of drug arrests took a big leap and was on a steady trend of going up in numbers. So, and so we see in 1994, it continued to climb. Now we're not getting into how it impacted any specific area just yet. We're talking about the impact uh, nationwide throughout all of the United States from those agencies that reported or shared their crime data. So now when we look at chart 5.2, chart 5.2, it gets a little bit specific. It now talking about estimated arrests for illegal use of heroin and cocaine, and not just use. This is also distribution and sales and possession. So, and for that same time period, where heroin and cocaine was the focal point, again in 1980, there was under 100,000 arrests relating to heroin and cocaine. But that doesn't say that it wasn't a problem, because what this chart communicates to me is that from 1981 up to 1988, just shy of where the total drug arrest peaked, we see with heroin and cocaine that there was either a greater effort placed on the specificity of use and distribution of heroin and cocaine, or the fact that more people were being arrested for heroin and cocaine. And so we see it peak out in 1989 at just over 700,000 arrests. So roughly just about half of all of the arrests made throughout the United States from 1980 to 1989, almost half of that, or just about a little over half of those arrests, were in fact related to heroin and cocaine. Now, what we see after 1989, we see a brief decline in those types of arrests. And then right around 1994, we see a slight increase of arrests for heroin and cocaine. So this is around the same time frame where more than likely there were talks about the drug problems in America and the effects that it was having on communities throughout the United States, and the need to address it and to find something that was uh, very effective in dealing with it. And so from 1994 to 1995, we begin to see a slight decrease in arrests for heroin and cocaine, while overall drug arrests, we saw a steady incline. Now, that communicates something to me that pretty much says that while there was a period of increased use, possession, and or sales of heroin and cocaine between the period of 1980 to 1989, moving forward past 1989, uh, less people were being arrested for heroin and cocaine. And though there was a slight uptick in those arrests, it didn't last long in relation to the type of arrest. And we see the trend from 1994 moving forward. It appears that the arrest involving heroin and cocaine was somewhat on a decline. So, is this true? Are we assessing correctly, and are we analyzing the charts accurately? Well, let's take a look at some other charts. Now we're looking at estimated marijuana arrests throughout the United States from 1980 to 1995. So 1980, we saw just over 40,000 arrests that were uh, where marijuana was the focal point of the arrest. Uh, Going to that period of 1989, as we see, it was pretty sporadic from 1980 going to 1989. The numbers fluctuated more vividly. We can see the up and down uh, with marijuana being the focal element of arrest. And so by 1989, again, it was slightly over 40,000 arrests. This is nationwide. This is throughout all of the United States from those agencies that are sharing their data. Then we see a rather significant decrease in arrests for marijuana throughout the United States from 1989 to 1991, where they dropped down to just below 30,000 arrests for marijuana. Now, what was going on during that time frame in relations to marijuana use and sales and distribution? You know, again, there's more data out there that can paint a much broader and much more concise picture than just going by the charts. But I don't want to overwhelm you, especially if you're not a person that that likes looking at numbers and figuring out what numbers mean. So I don't want to overwhelm you. I do that on a daily basis and I enjoy it. You may not. So I'm trying to give it to you as simple as I can uh, to kind of paint the picture for you. Okay. And so now, what we see from 1989 to 99, we see the decrease. But now notice from 1991 uh, moving forward, we see a steady increase of arrests for marijuana throughout the United States. So something was going on. Something was going on that certainly was getting the attention of legislators, law enforcement agencies, and the likes. Something that clearly stated we must do something to get a handle on this. Otherwise, we're going to have a catastrophe. And if you notice, by 1995, just 1 year after the enactment of the crime bill, uh, it went up from roughly about 45,000 arrests. It jumped up to almost 60,000 arrests. So an increase of about 15,000 arrests for marijuana. Now let's move over to chart 5.4. And now we're looking at synthetic drugs specifically. In the 1980s, you really didn't hear much talk about it. People think that right around the mid 2000s, when there was more focus on synthetic drugs, that it was something brand new. No, it was really a resurgence. People were already indulging in synthetic drugs for a long time. It just was not in great numbers like what we began to see. But notice here in 1980, it was roughly about 25,000 arrests for synthetic drugs throughout the United States in that time frame. And then we see it slightly peak out at 1982 at right at about 25,000. And then we see a decrease in arrests, and it kind of almost held steady for 1 year. And then from 1985 to 1988, we see a jump up from about 20,000 to just over 30,000 arrests. So again, this could be widespread use, people catching on, a new way to experience a high at an inexpensive cost, because synthetic drugs were significantly priced significantly less than your other forms of drug use. And so that may be one of many factors that come into play. But then we notice that from 1988, there is a decrease in arrests. And again, that might speak to, again, I say might, that might speak to efforts that seem to have been working. Um, most people don't like the idea of toughening laws on drugs. And where the Black community is concerned, You know, one of the prominent arguments is that, well, if the government didn't put drugs in our communities, we would not have as many arrests of blacks for drugs. And there may be some truth to that. I'm not going to argue against that view. However, I will say that we always do have a choice, even if it's a difficult choice. We do have a choice. And so for some, it was survival, you know, that would be the argument of some. And then for others, it was, I simply didn't want to go to jail. And I found another way. You know, so there's many responses that can be given in light of the belief that the government pumped drugs into our communities to keep us suppressed, to keep us docile, to keep us in a state of non-participation in wealth building and sharing in the economy, and thereby being the culprit behind our own demise. You know, that's an argument that some have, and so I'm not going to refute their argument. I just want to deal with um, what what the numbers tell us, or what the numbers tell me, because it may not tell you the same thing, and that's fine. So I just want to share my perspective. Now, if you notice from 1993, it seemed to kind of level out between 92 and 93. So whatever was going on, it seemed to have been working. And then from 1993 moving forward, just before the enactment of the 1994 crime bill, the trend showed, oh, here we go, more arrests. Now, this is before the 1994 crime bill. There was, again, an increase that led to more arrests. And from 94 going into 1995, we see a rather steep increase in arrest numbers, from roughly just over 20,000, well, over 25,000 to just under 35,000 new arrests, right? So it gets really interesting. Then here's one other chart I want to show you. This is estimated other drug arrests, and these are other drug matters. This could be the overindulgence of prescribed drugs or illegal use, sales, and distribution of prescription drugs, the abuse of prescription drugs that led to an arrest. It could be a number of drug related incidents that resulted in an arrest. And so, what we see here, what the trend shows us, is for these others in 1980, we had about 100,000 arrests for other drugs. And then it was pretty steady up until about 1985. There was a slight increase there. From 85 to 87, there was another slight increase of arrests made. And then from 87 to 89, and if you've been listening to me and following me with the charts that I'm sharing with you, 1989 was a very significant period of time. Now, I would, say this would probably be a good place to start investigating what was going on around that time frame, because we see a peak at 1989, almost with each chart. 1989 clearly was showing something. And so here we have over 200,000 arrests in other drugs. And then there's that slight decrease again. So what was going on from 1985 to 1989 that resulted in more arrests for drugs, and in this case, other drugs? And then what was either enacted or revisited or put in place that resulted in a decrease of arrests? And it appeared to be working up to 1992 for these other drugs. And then all of a sudden, here's a second observation that stands out. From 1992 going up to 1994, the enactment of the 1994 crime bill, what happened that led to an increase of drug arrests throughout the United States? What took place? What were those factors that led to more arrests? And clearly it's not just one or two factors. Like I said, it would be overwhelming trying to speak to all of the factors that may have come into play. But we see from there, from 1994 to 1995, moving forward, that there is the trend suggests that whatever was going on required more arrests. So that's one way of looking at some numbers. Now, I want to scroll down because I want to get into some specificity. As you can see now, here, table 5.4 talks about the percent distribution of total drug arrests by race throughout the United States, and looking at the periods of 1980, 1985, 1990, and 1995. So we're looking at a succession of 5-year time frames in relation to race, because one of the other pressing arguments from the Black community is the disproportionate number of arrests of Black people for drugs. So let's take a look at the numbers. And again, these are not my numbers. These are numbers from agencies throughout the United States that share their data with the FBI, and those numbers are aggregated and then put out for all to see. So when we look at the year, let me scroll over here so that you can see the year. Okay, so in 1980, dealing with all that have shared information, so that's the 100% marker. Of that, in relation to the population, 74.7% whites in 1980 throughout the United States were arrested for drugs. In comparison, at that same time frame, 24.5% Blacks were arrested. And then, of course, we look at the other information that's been collected on Indians and Asians, less than 1% for each ethnic group. But in relation to the number of, or the percentage of Blacks arrested for drugs in 1980, in comparison to the number of percentage of whites arrested for drug-related incidents, we see a higher percentage. Now, some are going to argue, well, that's because there are more white people in America than there are Black people. That is true. These numbers are based on the total population size, not the race. They're based on the total population. So when we talk about the total population, we're talking about 74.7% of the total population that were arrested for drugs were white in 1980. And then of the total population of the United States, of those reporting agencies, 24.5% of those persons arrested for drugs were Black. Now, these are not my numbers, okay? But this is what this is communicating to me. Now, 5 years down, we take a look at 1985. Of the total population of the United States, the estimated population number based on the agencies that are sharing their data, 67.8% of those arrests were white. 31.2% were Black. And then for Indians and Asians, again, less than 1%. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, let's go another 5 years and take a look at 1990. 1990 of the estimated population of the United States, of those agencies that report and share their data, 58% of those arrests were white and 41.2% were black. Now, so what we do see is in terms of the number of whites arrested for drugs from 1980 to 1990, we see the numbers or the percentage decreasing. So that tells us something. That tells us something. We see the percentages decreasing. And for blacks from 1980 to 1990, we see the percentages steadily increasing. Now, I don't know if you saw that or not, and please don't be offended. I'm not implying that you're dumb. You know, not everybody knows how to read numbers. Okay, but this is what it's communicating to me. It is showing me by the numbers or the percentages in this case, in relation to the total estimated population, based on those agencies that share their data with the FBI, that the drug arrests of whites steadily decreased percentage-wise, while the arrests of blacks steadily increased percentage-wise. Now, that's what the numbers are telling me, and I don't know. Maybe you see that, maybe you don't. But that is what the numbers are telling me. So now that begs to argue, okay, so what's going on? What has happened that has caused the number of arrests of whites to decrease percentage-wise over that time frame, 10 years, and the number of blacks arrested to increase over that 10-year period? So that stands to be argued. And I think it's a valid argument. Now, we look 5 years beyond. Now we've got the enactment of the 1994 crime bill, and just 1 year after its enactment. And now let's see what happens to the numbers. So 1995, we see a slight full percent increase of whites arrested for drugs. So it went up from 58% of the population to 59.9%, almost 2% increase of whites arrested by drugs. And in relation, we see the number of blacks arrested went down percentage-wise from 41.2% to 39.1%. So where we saw an increase of the percentage of whites by almost a 2% margin, the number of arrests of blacks, we see a decrease of almost 2% of blacks being arrested. So what happened? What's going on? Because some argue that because of the 1994 crime bill, that blacks were disproportionately arrested for drugs more than whites were. Now, this table here is showing the numbers, and again, I gotta keep reiterating so that you don't misconstrue what I'm saying. This is showing that based on those agencies and cities and counties throughout the United States that shared their crime data, 100% of the estimated population, the percentage of whites following the enactment of the 1994 crime bill, more whites were arrested for drugs than blacks by comparison of the total population. And then when we look at Indians and Asians, less than 1%. We see a slight increase percentage-wise for Indians and Asians. So there's a whole lot that's going on there that we don't tend to talk about. Many just focus on the crime bill. But what these percentages are communicating to me is prior to the 1994 crime bill, something was going on that led to the decrease in percentage of arrests for whites versus the increase of percentage of arrests for blacks. Now it could have, it could have certainly been that more whites in comparison were being given a second or third chance, were not being arrested, it could very well be. But again, there are just too many factors to definitively say at this point that it was simply because they weren't arresting whites. They were simply focusing on just the blacks. We have to look at a whole lot more data to come to those conclusions. So, we can only deal with the numbers that we have. Now, let's move over here to the right. And now we deal with some specificity here. So we look at the percent changes in the estimated number of heroin, and cocaine, and marijuana arrests by race in the United States between 1995 over 1990. So now we're going to do a 5-year comparison here. So in terms of whites, for heroin and cocaine, 3.6% of the population that were arrested for heroin and cocaine were white. In comparison to that number over that 5-year period, 1.3% were arrested for heroin and cocaine. And then for the others, about 34.4%. Now, here's what this is basically saying to me. And this is just, a smidget of the picture in terms of heroin and cocaine use, possession, distribution, sales. More whites were apprehended for heroin and cocaine and for heroin and cocaine than blacks were. But now when we go over to the other side and we look at how many percentage-wise were arrested for marijuana during that same time frame, there certainly seems to have been a greater focus placed on marijuana than there was heroin and cocaine. And so you had 69.1% of the population in that 5-year time frame that were arrested for marijuana, as opposed to 97.7% blacks. Now, again, that raises some arguments. Yes, no question. That raises some arguments that we may never get concrete answers for, that we will more than likely continue to argue the point, but at least now we see the numbers, we see the percentages that kind of helps to paint the picture more clearly. I'm hoping that that's what this is doing for you. Okay, so let's move on. And I'm not going to be much longer. I didn't want this to last too long. To be honest, I lost track of my time. Okay, so let me minimize this a little bit. Okay, so now when we talk about adult drug arrests, and one thing about this, if you would just simply in your Google search bar, if you would simply type in FBI crime statistics 1980, 1995, you'll be able to get to these statistics and these charts as well. I mean, there's some good stuff here. Okay, excuse me one moment. Son wants to go skating tonight, and I need to see if mom can take him. Okay, all right. I'm surprised I was able to do that and stay focused. I'm getting better. All right, so the estimated number of adult drug arrests between that 5 year period, we look at again from 1980 to 1989. Now this is just adults. This is blacks, whites, and all others. We look at from about 40, almost 50,000 in 1980 to 1995, which is a 15-year time span of a little over 120,000. And then from 1989 to about 1993, we saw a slight trend of reduced numbers of arrests of adults, and then a slight increase of adult arrests in 1993, and then off there at just under 100,000, or right at 100,000. And then moving forward from 1993 up to 1995, the trend suggests more arrests of adults for drug-related arrests. So it begs to say that there clearly was a drug problem. There's no question about that. Clearly, there was a drug problem. And so how did it come about? We'd have to dig further back than just 1980. We really would. We would have to dig much further back to try to even paint the picture of how this even became a problem. But it's clear that there was a drug problem in America and it needed to be addressed. Now, when we talk about juvenile arrest, because again, this is one of the areas that is immensely argued, is that many of our young African-American males under 21 were disproportionately arrested for marijuana charges and incarcerated, as opposed to the number of young whites. So that remains an argument. And so I'm not going to say it's not a valid argument, you know. But let's take a look at these numbers. So when we're talking about juveniles, now this is all juveniles. It's not broken down by race. It's broken down by age bracket. So in 1980, we're looking at just over 100,000. There's a trend that showed that it was kind of slightly decreasing, level decrease. And then right around 1985, it began to climb up to just under 100,000. 1980 was actually over 100,000. And then between 1985 and 1989, again, 1989 was a determinant year. You know, I think after tonight, I think I'm going to take a look at what was going on in America in 1989, you know, because 1989 is kind of leaps out to me. I don't know if it leaps out to you, but 1989 just leaps out. What was going on between 1985 and 1989? Something major was going on that played into these arrests. So we see it climb up to a little over 100,000, about almost 115,000. And then we see a slight decline in arrests from 1989 to about 1991. And that could be because of some changes in the drug laws and how law enforcement would approach, you know, drug matters, what type of drug incidents would result in an arrest versus those that would be issued a citation and referred to programs. You know, it'll be interested to see what the legislation was right around that time frame. And so if I remember to do so, I probably need to make a note of that. I'm going to try to and find that information out. You may already know it. I don't. You know, I'm not a genius, so I'm going to look it up. All right. So from 1991 to 1995, we see an enormous increase of arrest of juveniles, an enormous increase. Now, again, this particular chart does not distinguish between white and black and other ethnic groups. This is just all juveniles lumped together. So it would be interesting to see what portion of these arrests are specific to that of young African-American males. It would be interesting to see. So I'm going to be digging for that. And what I find, I'll share. So I think I want to end off there for now. I think I've given you quite a bit to chew on. And so I don't want to overwhelm you because, like I said, for some people, looking at charts and percentages and stats and that's not everybody's thing, and I get it, and it could be a bit overwhelming. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, and I hope I didn't overwhelm you too much. But I did want to at least paint the picture because we do see that there was a drug problem. There's no question about that. The 1990s, marijuana appeared to be the fastest growing drug category, with arrests increasing 80% between 1990 and 1995, while heroin and cocaine arrests have increased only at a rate of about 6%. So on a regional basis, the more populous South has replaced the West as the region in the country during the 1990s with the highest number of drug violation arrests. So a great number of those arrests were in the southern region. Okay, so if that kind of adds to the picture that we've painted. During the past decade and a half, the age and racial composition of drug arrestees has also shown a change. And so when we're talking about adults, the adults are more frequently arrested than the juveniles were, but the number of adult arrests is up about 173%, while the number of juvenile arrests increased 73%. So there's some interesting things that were playing out here that the numbers kind of speak to. If you don't already have that that background history as a point of reference, this kind of paints the picture for us. So the current 1995 figures show juveniles constituted only 13% of total drug arrests, which was a decline of 32% from the 1980 level. However, a year-to-year analysis of juveniles arrested for drug abuse violations during the 1990s shows a rise in the number of persons under the age of 18 being arrested in this particular category. Now, when we talk about the racial distribution of drug arrestees, that also changed. Okay, and I think in the following charts and stats that might begin to come clear, and I'll probably show those in another video, not in this session. But the 1995 non-whites accounted for 40% of drug arrests compared to 25% in 1980. So when we're talking about non-whites, we are talking about African Americans, we're talking about other ethnic groups, people of color, okay? And I don't know why they suddenly kind of clumped us all together for people of color. No, we're Black. And then there's people of color, but that's another argument. So in retrospect, the age and racial makeup of the marijuana arrestee has also undergone a change. When we looked at from 1990 to 1995, the number of persons under the age of 18 that were arrested for marijuana increased 278%. So here's some factual percentages based on information that is made available. Additionally, during the 1990s, the number of non-white persons arrested for marijuana violations also increased. Interesting. So more specifically, arrests for Blacks were up 98%. Let me say that again. Arrests for Blacks were up 98%. And then other races were up 96%. So there's a slightly more Blacks appear to have were being arrested than other races. The number of marijuana arrests for whites also increased about 96%. So again, there is a 2% marginal difference where more blacks were arrested for marijuana than whites. So these are numbers that can be verified. I've given you the website where you can find these stats. If you go to FBI, if you type in your Google search address bar, FBI crime stats 1980 to 1995, or just simply type in FBI crime stats 1995, it will take you to where you can see all of the numbers. I've shown you just a little bit of them. So that's it for now. I hope that you found this interesting. And if you did, again, I want to ask you to hit the subscribe button. Doing so allows for more people to see this video recording. And if you would subscribe, that would be nice. I would appreciate it. And if you click on the bell, if you are watching this on my YouTube channel, if you click on the bell, then you'll get notifications when I upload new content. If you're watching this on my Facebook platform, then do me a favor and hit the like button. Again, that helps with the algorithms and getting it in front of more people who may also find this type of information useful and insightful, especially for those who are building their argument. And you know, there's a lot of people out there. This is the conversation, but not too many are actually showing the numbers. They're talking the numbers, but they're not showing the numbers. They're not showing where they're getting the numbers from. And so I want to give you a point of reference. If I'm going to throw some numbers out there, if I'm going to throw percentages out there, I want to show you where I'm getting that from. And if you have other resources of numbers and percentages, by all means, share that. Share that. I think that the more information that we can make accessible to those who would hear our perspective and our views on a particular topic, I think the better. You know, just throwing a number out there does not make it so. And I'm not saying that the numbers that are documented are accurate, because there is some margin for error. But at least it gives us a more clear working frame, you know, to give us an idea of what we believe is going on. So there you have it. Again, thank you so much. If you like this, then certainly please let me know. If you have some more input, I'm open to it. Certainly put that in the comment section. I try to respond back in a timely manner between 16 and 18-hour days. That's why I don't get to post often, but I'd love to hear your take. I'd love to hear your perspective, and again, in a respectful manner. Thank you for watching. Do have a peaceful and enjoyable rest of the weekend, or whatever day it is that you're watching this. Be safe. Continue to practice social distancing. Do wear your mask, whether you believe in it or not. Remember, you're protecting others by doing so. It doesn't necessarily protect you. It don't. But it does minimize the possibility of someone being infected, especially if you are a carrier without symptoms. Okay. So thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. I'm signing off now. Take care.